It's time for Market Explainer, your number one business news podcast. Hosted by Danny and the big man. And it starts right now.
So let's just jump into this next story. Homeowners associations seek to stop massive investors such as BlackRock from buying up houses only to rent them out. Now, here's the thing. In general, I think homeowners associations are just a way for the government to not do their job and put it off on a private organization. So everyone's just like, well, I guess I can't have a car because the HOA said that, right?
You are so wrong.
Right.
The government has nothing or wants nothing to do with your house. Okay? Nothing. Okay? HOAs were not created, nor are they utilized for anything that has to do with the federal or state government. Okay? At all. All right?
If you say so.
Homeowners associations or neighborhood owners associations, right?
Vile organizations.
No, they're not. They're were created. Go ahead.
They're private governments, right?
To a certain extent. Now,
they're
states,
private governments without competition.
States give them power, right? Yeah. Not the federal government. States give them power based on their state's rules. I didn't say the federal government. Yeah.
Now,
different states give them different levels of power. And that ebbs and flows with a lot of different things. There was a period here in Texas where HOAs could literally take your house away from you.
Yeah.
Okay, if you didn't pay your fees and whatever.
Right.
And then it came, well, they can't take your home, but they can put a lien against it where you cannot, a lien
sell
against
it.
The title itself.
Right.
Where you can't sell it, you can't get an equity loan, you can't, whatever. So I definitely am not a big fan of the amount of powers that HOAs are given in certain places. However, the HOA at the level of what it was meant to be, which is giving a neighborhood the ability to maintain the neighborhood at a level where they take care of common areas. Right. They take care of common things that everybody uses, playgrounds, pools, that kind of stuff, lawns, right? Yeah. That kind of stuff. And then on top of that, get Billy Bob from down the street not to have 3 broken down cars in his front yard, right?
Correct. Yes.
Those are why HOAs should exist.
Yeah, now, and again, vile organizations that are usurping individual land and property owners' rights.
Right.
Awful.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, what do you call a group of Karens? They're called a homeowners association.
No. Now, in this case, the reason it's such a big deal and really is a national story is kind of like, look, they're going, well, if we can control this, again, they're trying to skirt laws, right? Yeah. Everybody's trying to figure out what a lot of people don't even see as a housing crisis. I do. When your average everyday person cannot take their 3.5%, their 5%, their 10%, and buy a home for what the home is worth,
right?
Then that is a housing crisis, which is what we have right now. Your average everyday person is being pushed out of the market by increase in prices and companies like BlackRock and real estate funds and trusts and stuff like
Blackstone. And here's what I say in response to that. If we want to look at someone to blame, BlackRock is to blame, but we really need to look at this thing called the Federal Reserve.
Stop it.
I know.
Stop it. This is not about the United States government printing money. It's not about that. Okay?
Right. Except it is, but that's fine. We'll leave that because that's a rabbit hole we'll never return from because we'll all both end up getting poisoned.
Yeah.
So, if homeowners associations do one thing that irritates me as a guy who wants to invest in real estate, and it was enough that made me not want to buy single family homes in HOA communities, is that they have all sorts of rules about renting it out, right? And they make it complicated for you. Because even right now, like, I know somebody just sold their house, and one of the main reasons was it was one of the last big houses that person could buy that wasn't in an HOA because they were probably going to use it in a manner that was not conducive to what the HOA wanted.
Well, to the neighborhood, that's the whole, HOAs make your neighbors important, right? Like,
HOAs give your neighbors power over how you use your own property. And
But
that
it's
to me is
collective.
called
It's not individual.
socialist.
It's
Exactly. Yeah.
collective power,
Correct.
right?
Correct. And
So
it's socialist. Correct.
and I know, look, I have a lot of clients that one of their first thing is like, I don't want to live in an HOA, which, okay,
Yes.
I get you. And 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that would have been much easier. However,
Right.
if the house has been built in the last 20 years, it's in an HOA neighborhood,
Yeah,
okay?
that's the problem.
Because most people want to live under that umbrella. Now, they
Yeah.
don't want the inconvenience of getting a letter in the mail if you leave your trash can out one extra day,
Right.
or your lawn's 2 inches taller than it should be, or whatever. It's not for you, though. It's for the guy
Yeah.
down the street that doesn't mow his lawn for an entire summer, right?
Yeah.
It's for the 3 cars that are broken down in somebody's driveway and they all look rusted and broken down and whatever. It's
Those
anyway,
are collector's items. Those are lawn art, and I refuse. No, I remember there was a guy in my parents' old neighborhood that came to them and said, there are houses in this neighborhood that are under this certain price cap. There's two of them. And we should not have houses that are this cheap in this neighborhood. It brings down all of our values, blah, 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 blah. And my dad said, no, thank you. You can go now. They let him leave the house. The two houses he was speaking about was my dad's house, my parents' house, and the other Indian family in the neighborhood.
But see, that's the problem. If that guy had every bit, that house is affecting everybody's value.
Yeah.
That house is, so you are. So even though you are not directly affecting
Yeah.
that person's house, you are indirectly. Now, where it ties back
what
to
ended
this
up
story.
happening is, here's what ended up happening. Those two cheap houses, instead of bringing the rest of the neighborhood down, just went up with the rest of the neighborhood.
It brought the cheap houses up, which
that's all that
which
happened.
can happen in a hot market, but doesn't. It has the opposite effect in a low market, right?
Yes.
It really drags them down, right? So, which is all about timing. So, how it ties back into this is HOAs are now trying to use their power because it exists to slow down. If we pass rules about rental neighborhoods, not only, hey, we can only have so many rentals in a neighborhood, which means if we've met that cap, you can't buy it if you're a renter. Or a lot of these are doing, especially in urban areas, are doing the short-term rentals, adding that to HOAs and stuff like that, where you can't have short rental properties in certain areas, that kind of stuff. But really, it's some of these rules and regulations get really crazy. Like, they can make it, if you want, because here's the deal. If especially smaller investors, not even your big BlackRock's or whatever, but if I'm a small investor and I'm buying this house, it's very difficult for you as an HOA to know that I'm not going to live in that house, right?
Right.
You only know what I say when I fill out my HOA paperwork, right?
Right.
BlackRock's name is obvious, right? But
they're not buying it in BlackRock. This doesn't say BlackRock LLC. It probably says something else.
That's a whole different rabbit hole of how these big funds buy these. There's a couple of big REITs, what they call REITs out there, real estate investment trusts, that buy every house under
its own
a new
separate
company,
LLC,
its own entity, right?
Well, so Texas will let you do something called a series LLC, where it's one LLC, but you get to divide it up into multiple micro LLCs.
No, but this one literally goes out to continue, and it does it that way for the anonymity of that. Nobody's looking at the person that's buying it and going, this is BlackRock, or this is Vanguard, or this is Invitation Homes, or whatever trust it may be, right?
Right, because I have an attorney out in Wyoming for $200 will set up an LLC for you, and I got a couple. So
Nevada's another one like that. Anyway, the point is they're passing rules that, like, okay, how can we figure out even the smaller investors? And they're like, look, you have to, if you want to rent out the property, fine, but it has to be vacant for 6 months. Or you have to live there a year as your primary residence.
Okay.
Or, like, they are literally creating these hurdles with the idea of skirting these.
And again, I agree with the goal here, which is how does the public squeeze out BlackRock and Vanguard from owning all of the real estate? And here's all I'm saying. They're just Lehman Brothers with better branding. Okay. Eventually, they're going to hold too much assets on their books that they're leveraged too high. If we can keep getting these interest rates.
But that could take 2 decades. People have to have a place to buy next month. Look, here's why this is not going to work. Okay, even if there are HOAs out there, and there's obviously ones that are trying this, there are obviously, and look, this is a big pre-Panini, as Danny likes to say, This was a big deal when it came to HOAs were doing this with short-term rentals, right?
Yeah.
VRBOs and Airbnbs. And that didn't work either. Airbnbs and VRBOs still work or still
Yeah.
exist. And here's the reason why is you'll never get enough HOAs to do it for it to have really any effect. Now,
Right.
if the entire state of Texas had a statewide HOA board, which they don't, but let's just
Right.
say they did, and the
Yep.
entire Texas HOA board said this is no longer allowed, then
Right.
that would have an effect. But that's not the way it is. HOAs are confined to little tiny neighborhoods, right?
Right.
And
Well,
they'll
some of these
never be
HOAs
big
are-
enough.
Some
Go
of
ahead.
these HOAs oversee several communities. So.
Well, no. Those are different. Those are management of HOA companies.
Oh, okay.
The individual HOA, because most HOAs are ran by a management company because the people in the HOA don't want to have anything to do with the HOA. They don't want to sit in board meetings. They don't want to decide what company is, fixing the pool, or they don't want anything. So they hire management companies to do this. And those management companies can manage hundreds of HOAs, but they don't decide anything for them. Every individual HOA stands alone for their own
Okay.
decisions.
Stuff I didn't know. We learned
right.
something today.
Well, but again, and that's the reason why you'll never get enough of these HOAs to pass a rule about these rental properties that would affect anything that these big trusts are doing, right? They'll just buy in the neighborhood next door
Right.
that doesn't have that rule.
Well, it's all very fascinating that, in a few communities I'm looking at, the number of multifamily units that are going up is preposterous, right? Yeah. I was just helping somebody find an apartment, and there was three new multifamily developments in their city, and all of them were leased up. I'm like, who's leasing these? This is like not even downtown, and you're paying twice what you're almost paying a mortgage on some of these. I was flabbergasted.
Well, but both sides are playing this deal. So this article is about HOAs trying to keep renters or, rental properties and renters out of neighborhoods, right?
Yeah.
But the other side, builders and stuff like that, are playing the same game. There's a neighborhood that just went up here in Cedar Park, right? That they classified the neighborhood as condominiums, even though they're these big, huge single-family homes. But by classifying the neighborhood as condominiums, they get to bypass the Texas lot requirements of how much space needs to be between each house and, for a certain size home and all. They get to bypass all of those and put these huge houses on these tiny little lots where you can almost put a hand on both houses side by side.
Yeah.
But they're both 3,000 square foot houses, right?
Yeah.
And they get to bypass that. And, your HOA fees, talk about HOA fees on your condo neighborhoods, they can be hundreds of dollars a month because they maintain everything outside of your house. They mow your lawn for you. They do all of that. But it's hundreds of dollars. And instead of an address like, 102 Fulton Creek Drive, it's the name of the neighborhood, Alton Creek, Unit 64. Right. And so they're getting so the other side, builders, right, manufacturers, these kind of things are using the same kind of loopholes,
right,
as HOAs are trying to use.
Yeah, and listen, some of those communities, we would call it lock and leave, where it's like, I want to go somewhere else. Like there's a certain group of people for whom that is. Listen, you get all the benefits of a condo without having to be stacked on top of each other, like in a building. I think that appeals to a certain group of people. Doesn't appeal to me, right? I'm going to go buy a stretch of land somewhere and just say, we're putting up barndos, which is just barn dominiums. Everyone gets 2 acres. Figure out how to mow your lawn. You're a big boy. You got the mortgage.
Yeah.
Big boy, big girl, whatever. We're not doing this anymore. So that's what I'm.
The problem is those places are getting more and more rare if they're anywhere near major metro cities.
Yes.
Okay. And when I say that, like Austin, the Austin Central Texas area is a metroplex at this point, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's enveloped
disgusting too, but
all of the cities around Austin, and that has brought HOAs. So Georgetown, if it's a new community built in the last 10, 20 years in Georgetown, it's in an HOA. And Georgetown used to be out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, Georgetown is in the middle of nowhere. Because I was looking for a rental somewhere in Austin, And I'm like, they're charging how much for Georgetown? I remember I talked to someone who lived in Georgetown. He said, yeah, I was going to that store downtown. I was like, downtown? Which one are you talking about? He's like, the one in the Domain. I was like, that ain't downtown, pal.
That's barely North Austin. Okay,
Yeah,
that's Round Rock. All right,
yeah,
that's
that the Domain is not. And then I can't. Nonetheless, I mean, I think this move is the same move like this that the city of Austin did, like in the 80s, where they just said, we're not going to complete loop one. So people, if we don't build it, they won't come. And then instead, there's just traffic. That's the difference. All they did was they just created traffic by not building. So for those of you outside of Austin, you may not understand this. MOPAC, which most of the locals will say MOPAC. The only people who say Loop One just moved here from California. That's how you can identify them. I'm not saying you should spit on them, but
that's not nice, Danny.
Yeah, it's not nice, and I'm not saying you should. But I just get a loogie just developing when I see. But it doesn't loop. It doesn't loop. It's called Loop One, and it doesn't loop. It just goes. No. It doesn't make any sense.
It's north and south. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so, anyways, yeah, we're going to move on to this next story.
Hey, really quick, before we do move on to that story, I wanted to tell you one of the comments on one of the stories about this. I really enjoy reading comments on stories. Danny knows this, right? How people think about these stories. My favorite was a conspiracy theorist that believed that this article was actually done by the big funds and trusts that are buying all these real estates as a way to, hey, we're getting pushback against us. See, we're having a hard time buying all these
Here's
homes.
The thing. I'm going to just say this. I appreciate that these HOAs are trying to do it, but let me tell you something. Guess who's going to start buying up HOA management companies?
Hey, there's a lot of money in that, man.
That's what I'm saying.
A lot of money in that.
I didn't realize that's how. So I didn't realize there's a delineation between the HOA itself and the HOA management company. Mm-hmm. I thought they were one and the same. I thought what happened is community votes and they go, okay, this is who's going to manage our community, whatever. Now that I understand that they're two separate things, if I'm BlackRock, if I'm Blackstone, if I'm any of these companies, BlackRock was only buying up all of these single family homes because they had a line directly to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve called them up during the crash and said, can you construct an figure this out for us? Mm-hmm. Right? Because it's so complex.
It is.
It's extremely complex. So when the Federal Reserve, when they called BlackRock, guess what? What happened? Oh, BlackRock had a special in with the Federal Reserve, and now who's buying up all the single family homes?
Danny loves his conspiracy theories. But anyway,
right.
All right.
Yeah, everything I just stated, you can just look up and it's factual. So it's not a conspiracy. All right.
Sure.
We're moving on, and the next thing I want to let you know is,
do I have to go to DuckDuckGo first? I digress. Go ahead.
That's true. Actually, I used Brave Search now because DuckDuckGo.
Yeah.
So Avenue Lucky is my agency that develops websites for that provides done-for-you marketing services. You can check out avenuelucky.com. You can see a bunch of my in-house projects there. That is, I of course sponsor my own podcast.